Hello and welcome to the debut episode of the Strange and Unusual podcast. We dive into some of the most strangest, darkest, and weirdest corners of the world. But starting off on this debut episode, we dive into the top 5 events that changed the course of the world. Before we do that, give me your thoughts in the comment section below and let me know any other topics you want covered. One day, 24 hours, 1,440 minutes, 86,400 seconds. Some days are just another turn of the calendar, forgettable, routine, insignificant. Yet occasionally, there are days that shake the very foundations of history. Days when the world tilts upon its axis and never returns to how it once was. Moments filled with triumph, tragedy, and transformation. These 5 days shaped the modern world as we know it, sending shockwaves across continents, altering the fate of nations, and redefining humanity's future. So let's jump in. Of course, at number 5, right off the bat, we got to go back to July 20th, 1969. Of course, it's the day that shattered the limits of human achievement. For centuries, the moon remained untouchable, an unreachable world suspended in the sky, a realm of myths, dream, and endless speculation. Then, in a single moment, it transformed into a place where humans could walk. 650 million people sat glued to their televisions, watching as a ghostly figure descended a metal ladder. The world fell silent, every breath held. Then, to the crackling radio waves, history was made. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. With these words, Neil Armstrong pressed his boots into the lunar dust. Humanity had finally left Earth. Yet this moment was not merely about space. It was about extraordinary progress. Only a decade earlier, the very thought seemed like science fiction. The technology did not yet exist, and the risks were staggering. 3 men sat atop a 36-story rocket carrying nearly 1 million gallons of fuel, aware that a single minor failure meant instant death. And yet, they launched. The Apollo 11 mission wasn't just an American triumph. It was a defining moment for all of humanity. Let's not forget, however, that the Soviets first placed the satellite Sputnik into orbit on the 4th of October, 1957, and then launched the first human into space on April 12, 1969. Together, these 3 historic events reached a dazzling crescendo on July 20th, 1969. For the first time, humans ventured beyond their own world, and the impact was immense. Space exploration accelerated. Technology leapt forward dramatically. Satellites, computers, medicine. Nearly every aspect of modern life still carries the fingerprints of Apollo's groundbreaking innovations. Beyond technological advancement, it transformed our perspective. Because if we could reach the moon, what else was possible? That one day didn't just mark a new frontier. It proved there are no limits, only boundaries that we dare to surpass. Then, let's go back even further to October 29th, 1929. Black Tuesday. It began like any other Tuesday, but by the end of the day, the world would be changed forever. Black Tuesday, the day the Roaring Twenties came to a violent and screeching halt. The day fortunes evaporated in an instant. The day the world learned just how fragile prosperity truly was. It began with whispers. Stock prices had been slipping for weeks. Yet most believed the market was untouchable. Then panic struck. The numbers on the ticker tape weren't merely falling, they were collapsing. Investors flooded Wall Street, desperately attempting to sell before they lost everything. But there were no buyers. Within hours, billions of dollars vanished. Suit and ties that once symbolized power and prestige now stood in stunned silence. Some wept openly, others stared blankly at the unfolding chaos. For some, the despair proved too much to bear. Although stories of a widespread wave of suicides following the Wall Street crash are largely mythical, there was indeed a noticeable rise in the suicide rate that persisted for years. And this wasn't just an American catastrophe. The collapse rippled around the globe like a financial earthquake. Banks failed, business shuttered. Within weeks, millions were out of work. Within months, the world plunged into the worst economic crisis in modern history, the Great Depression. Factories once alive with the hum of industry now sat eerily silent. Bread lines stretched for miles. Families lost their homes, their futures, and their hope. In Germany, economic desperation fueled the rise of a leader who promised a way out, Adolf Hitler. In the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal reshaped the role of government forever. The Wall Street crash in 1929 wasn't sudden or unexpected. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The Roaring Twenties had been a wild ride of economic growth driven by speculation, risky investments, and towering mountains of debt. People poured their life savings into the stock market, convinced the market could only rise. Banks freely lent out money as if there was no tomorrow. Investors borrowed cash to buy stocks, betting everything on the belief that prices would continue to soar endlessly. But it was all a mirage. Prices were inflated far beyond reality, built on a foundation of overconfidence and greed. When cracks first appeared, panic swiftly took hold. The financial world would never recover in quite the same way. Regulations tightened, policies changed, and the illusion of an invincible market was forever shattered. The scars left by Black Tuesday ran deep. From that day onward, the world understood clearly that prosperity was never guaranteed and could vanish in a single moment. Then, let's travel to July 28th, 1914, the day that set the 20th century ablaze. A gunshot, a brief moment of silence, and then the world began to burn. On a crowded street in Cervelló, a car had taken a wrong turn. Inside sat Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Earlier that day, he had narrowly escaped an assassination attempt, but fate now brought him face to face with Gavrilo Princip, a young man armed with a pistol and driven by a cause. 2 shots rang out. The first struck the Archduke's wife, Sophie. The second hit Franz Ferdinand in the neck. Within minutes, both were dead. The world had witnessed assassinations before, but this one was different. Those bullets didn't merely kill a man and a woman. They set off a chain reaction that would engulf the planet in war. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Russia supported Serbia. Germany stood behind Austria-Hungary. France and Britain backed Russia. Within weeks, Europe became a powder keg. Then, on July 28th, exactly 1 month after the assassination, it exploded. World War I had begun. For 4 devastating years, millions of lives were swallowed by trenches, barbed wire, and mustard gas. Empires collapsed. Borders were redrawn in blood, and by the time the conflict ended in 1918, the world had become unrecognizable. Between 15 and 20 million people died as a result of those 2 gunshots in Sarajevo. Generations were decimated. Yet the war didn't just cull vast proportions of humanity or redraw maps. It planted the seeds for an even greater catastrophe. The Treaty of Versailles, which followed World War I, burdened Germany with debt and humiliation, fueling resentment that ultimately paved the way for Adolf Hitler's rise and the outbreak of World War II. The war's destructive aftermath unleashed revolutions, causing Russia to fall to communism while the Ottoman Empire crumbled. The delicate balance of power shattered, and all of it traced back to a single moment. A young man, a pistol, a wrong turn, and a world forever changed. Then, November 9th, 1989, the night the wall fell. For 28 years, the Berlin Wall stood as the ultimate symbol of division. Concrete and barbed wire, stretching 96 miles, splitting not merely a city, but the globe. On November 9th, 1989, the world witnessed the impossible unfold. On one side, West Berlin, representing freedom, capitalism, and a gateway to the West. On the other, East Berlin, defined by control, surveillance, a communist regime that turned its own citizens into prisoners. For decades, the Berlin Wall was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a powerful message. It declared, "You cannot leave. You cannot escape. You do not control your future." Anyone attempting to cross faced bullets. At least 140 people died seeking freedom. But cracks had already begun to appear across Eastern Europe. Communism was beginning to crumble. There were protests in Poland, Revolutions in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. The Soviet Union's iron grip was weakening, the clock was ticking, and everybody knew it. Then, on one fateful night, a single mistake changed everything. During a press conference, a government official named Gunta Schabowski stumbled through an announcement stating that travel restrictions between East and West Berlin were being lifted. A reporter asked, "When does this take effect?" Confused, he glanced at his notes and then shrugged. "As far as I know, immediately." Berliners, Germans, people around the world were stunned. That one sentence sent thousands of East Berliners rushing to the wall. At the border crossings, guards trained to kill anyone attempting to flee stood motionless. They had no orders, no plan, none of it even a clue of what was happening. Then suddenly, for the first time in nearly 3 decades, the gates opened. The floodgates of history burst wide open. Tears flowed, people laughed, crowds climbed the wall, dancing triumphantly upon the very structure that had imprisoned them. Sledgehammers swung, fists pounded, bricks fell. The entire world was watching, and the message was unmistakably clear. The Cold War was over. Within weeks, communist regimes across Eastern Europe collapsed. Just 2 years later, the Soviet Union itself ceased to exist. November 9th, 1989 wasn't merely about Berlin. It was about freedom breaking through oppression. It was the moment an entire generation realized that walls, no matter how tall or strong, could indeed fall. That leads us to March 11th, 2020, the day the world completely stopped. There are moments in history that you read about, and then there are other moments that you live through. Moments that crash in your life instantly, changing everything. March 11th, 2020 was one of those days. Yet COVID-19 didn't begin on this day. In fact, the dark specter had been steadily creeping across the planet for some time. Still, when the sun set on March 11th, our entire world had become redefined. On that day, the World Health Organization issued an announcement that sent shockwaves across the globe. COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic. Just 12 simple words, yet their impact was unimaginable. The virus had started as whispers from China in late 2019, and then bursts of panic in Italy, South Korea, Iran. It moved like a shadow, silent and unstoppable. But on that day, it became official. The entire planet was firmly in its grip. The numbers were already staggering. 118,000 cases, over 4,000 deaths, 114 countries affected. But the reality went beyond statistics. It hit people directly, where they lived, worked, and breathed. Flights were canceled, borders slammed shut. The global economy screeched to a halt as trillions of dollars vanished overnight. Within days, everything familiar became alien. Schools closed, restaurants locked their doors, office buildings stood empty as millions were instructed to stay home. Masks became a part of our daily appearance. Hand sanitizer turned into gold dust. Fear became the air we breathed. It was chaos. The New York Stock Exchange experienced the worst single-day point decline in history, plunging over 2,000 points. Sports leagues canceled their entire seasons. The Tokyo Olympics were eventually postponed. Even churches, mosques, and temples were compelled to close their doors. Hospitals became battlefields. Medical workers, overwhelmed and under-equipped, fought around the clock in a desperate struggle to save lives. Refrigerated trucks parked outside hospitals became makeshift morgues. In Italy, where death tolls soared, the sound of ambulances became a constant nightmare. Families were torn apart. Loved ones died alone. Funerals were attended through screens. It was a grief beyond comprehension. And then it arrived, the fastest vaccine development in human history. Less than a year after the pandemic was declared, vaccines began rolling out. Not a cure, certainly, but a lifeline, a fragile thread of hope. By 2022, the virus had claimed more than 6 million lives worldwide, but that was only the beginning. Millions more were left struggling with the long-term symptoms. Economies across the globe were devastated, with the estimated worldwide cost of the pandemic reaching a staggering $16 trillion. Mental health, already precarious at best, deteriorated even further. Suicide rates increased, as did incidents of domestic abuse, societal scars that we still feel today. March 11th, 2020 was the day the world stopped. It was the day that shattered our illusion of normality. A disruption felt by everyone. It's a day none of us will ever forget. A day that will shape our collective future for generations to come. History is not always shaped by slow and gradual change. Sometimes it's defined by sudden, monumental moments, by days when everything shifts. When the world we knew in the morning is gone by nightfall. These weren't merely 24-hour periods. They were turning points. History doesn't move forward in neat straight lines. It lurches forward, crashes, erupts in moments of triumph, tragedy, and transformation. These were times when the entire world held its breath. And as these days passed, nothing would be the same again. And that is the 5 moments that changed the course of the world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if there's anything else you want us to cover in future episodes, let me know. Before we end this episode, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Fastest VPN. Look, whether you're streaming, researching, traveling, or just scrolling late at night, your online privacy matters more than ever. And that's where Fastest VPN comes in. Fastest VPN keeps your internet activity private and secure with military-grade encryption, so your data stays your data. No tracking, no snooping, no sketchy third parties watching what you're doing online. It's also insanely easy to use. One click, you're protected. No tech degree required. And if you're someone who streams a lot, documentaries, podcasts, live sports, whatever, Fastest VPN lets you access content safely and reliably, even on public Wi-Fi, airports, hotels, coffee shops. Those are basically hacker playgrounds. Fastest VPN locks that down. One of my favorite things, you can use Fastest VPN on multiple devices at the same time. Phone, laptop, tablet, all covered under one account. And here's the best part. Fastest VPN offers a lifetime plan, so you're not stuck in paying month after month forever. So if you care about privacy, security, and peace of mind online, and honestly you should, use the link in the description today. Check out Fastest VPN. And with that, thank you so much for watching and listening. We will see you next time.